Kotan featured a surprise appearance by Vorinclex, reignited interest in new Phyrexia. I thought now would be a great time to talk about the Phyrexians, the civilization, beloved by people who post weird, toxic replies online, and also many normal people. And while we're discussing the Phyrexians, we might as well discuss Rath and Mirrodin too, since they're all tied together. If you're new to the channel, this is the series where I examine all the real-world influences behind Magic's bottom-up planes. My past two videos of the series were on planes with very obvious one-to-one real-world cultural influences, which is not the case this time. However, I'm sure there will still be plenty to talk about. There are times in the description if you'd like to skip to a specific plane. Let's start. Phyrexia. Religious influences. Phyrexia is strongly influenced by different perceptions of hell, down to its two hell-based alternate names. For those keeping track, that leaves us with 4 planes in Magic with a strong claim to be in hell. I wonder if they all have a big rivalry with each other. The high school football games must be intense. Anyway, like the titular realm of Dante's Inferno, Phyrexia consists of 9 spheres layered within each other. The 7th sphere resembles hell the most, serving as a place of great punishment. The artifact used to defeat the Phyrexians' first incursion on Dominaria was the Golgothian Silex, which sounds very similar to Golgotha, site of the crucifixion. As Jesus is known as a great enemy of hell, a connection can be drawn here. Phyrexia's destruction of the angelic Sarah's realm could be seen as a representation of the war between heaven and hell. Phyrexia also had beings described as angelic. This could be inspired by the common belief that demons are fallen angels. Yawgmoth, the shaper of Phyrexia as we know it, is very comparable to Satan. Like Satan in Dante's Inferno, Yawgmoth resides in the very center of his realm. Yawgmoth also exhibits 2 of the traits that Satan is most known for: constant deception and offering dark deals. In retrospect, this was a bad time to talk about Satan so much. Interestingly, Yawgmoth's title of the Ineffable is a descriptor often applied to the Abrahamic God. Also interesting is that Phyrexia actually began as an Eden-esque paradise, complete with snakes hanging out in trees. Other religious influences exist as well. Phyrexia's fanatical knights are known as paladins. In real life, the paladins were legendary Christian warriors. The holy text of Phyrexia is known as the Scriptures, a word strongly connotated with Christianity. An official style guide states that their rites and rituals are church-like. Annoyingly, that source refers to a second page of the article that apparently no longer exists. Thanks, official Magic website. Claws of Gix describes a practice similar to relic keeping, which is common in many real-world religions. Name origins. Phyrexia's symbol and the plane's name come from the Greek letter phi. The rest of the name possibly comes from Phyrexia, which means fever and also has a Greek origin. This is fitting with Phyrexia's focus on disease. Much of Phyrexia was descended from Dominarians infected with a disease called phthisis. Phthisis was the Greco-Roman personification of rot, decay, and putrefaction, lending their name to a number of real diseases, including tuberculosis. Phyrexia's first city was called Gamalgoth. Gamal means beauty in Arabic, while the Goths were a Germanic people famous for their warriors. The more modern definition of Goth is pretty fitting for the Phyrexians too, to be honest. Yawgmoth probably loves the cure, huh? Identity. The core identity of Phyrexia, known as Phyresis, is based on eugenics. This monstrous and ridiculous real-world ideology aims for perceived genetic perfection by attempting to control evolution. It is perhaps most famously associated with fascist Germany, but is also a shameful part of the histories of the UK, US, and beyond. For more information on this connection, and how Magic arguably poorly handles it, I recommend Spice 8 Rack's video on the topic, linked below. Relatedly, Phyrexia uses the term evolution to refer to an individual changing and improving. Scientifically speaking, evolution actually refers to gradual changes in an entire species over a great period of time. Phyrexia's complete lack of art, emotions, morals, personal thought, or freedom, and their drive for perfection through mechanization echo themes very common in science fiction. Examples of this include Doctor Who's Cybermen and Star Trek's Borg. Aesthetic. Phyrexia's aesthetic is heavily influenced by the artwork of H.R. Geiger. Geiger's work is described as cold, surreal, nightmarish depictions of biomechanical life, which fits Phyrexia very well. Characters like Gix and creatures like the Phyrexian Negator exhibit a strong resemblance to the xenomorphs of the Alien franchise, who were also designed by Geiger. The similarities are especially clear in the elongated head, bony protrusions, and mixture of exposed-looking and sleek flesh. Creatures. Gremlins originated in 1920s Royal Air Force culture and were blamed for mechanical problems in planes. Fittingly, Phyrexian gremlins mess with artifacts. Gargantua takes its name from one of the titular giants of the life of Gargantua and of Pantagruel, a pentology of 16th century French novels. The two bear little similarity beyond their name and size though, with the novels mostly focusing on satirizing politics and religion of the time. If you think the academic landscape of the 1500s has had it too good for too long, this might be the series for you. Cackling Fiend shows a zombie, apparently, with their eyelids forced open, evoking the 1971 film A Clockwork Orange. Deshabo Tavak is likely inspired by modern versions of Arachne of Greek myth, both in her ambitious personality and her humanoid spider design. Various Phyrexian walkers and creatures draw influence from the Martian walkers of 1988's War of the Worlds. All of these vehicles were deadly war machines balanced on thin, spider-esque legs. Shredodon is just an AT-AT from Star Wars with tusks. Also, both AT-AT and AT-AT are perfectly acceptable ways to say it, so don't AT-AT me. Finally, my favorite element of Phyrexian lore is that their weakness to apes is apparently a recurring trend. This is a reference to how apes are awesome. Also, that savage gorilla is clearly an orangutan. I don't think anyone at Wizards knows anything about simians. Rath. Rath was an artificial plane created by the Phyrexians. However, it had its own cultures, giving it some unique influences. Stronghold and planar structure. Firstly, its name clearly comes from the English word wrath, meaning strong, vengeful anger, fitting for the staging ground of Yawgmoth's revenge against Dominaria. Wrath could be described as a pocket dimension, a common trope in science fiction. Relatedly, the flowstone that powers Wrath is essentially nanotechnology. The Stronghold was a military base housed inside a volcano, evoking the Spectre base in the 1967 Bond film You Only Live Twice. That's the one where James Bond does Yellowface. The Predator, a Wrathy warship, bears resemblance to a Chinese junk ship, especially in its sails. Thumbscrews were a real torture device originating in early modern Europe. Vorath states that the torture will start small. As it was a slow process in real life, this is very accurate. On a similar note, Vorath's dungeon showcases an Iron Maiden-esque device. These torture devices are mostly associated with medieval Europe, but didn't actually appear until the early 19th century. The Evinkar was the title of the leader of the plane. It comes from Evincere, which means to conquer in Latin. One Evinkar was the shapeshifter Vorath, who had some visual similarity to the Twilight species of Star Wars. Why he, as a shapeshifter, chose to look like this 24/7 is beyond me. Contemplation shows Vorath magically viewing his progress through an orb. This imagery is common in fantasy, such as Saruman's Palantiri in The Lord of the Rings. Lobotomy's name comes from a discredited surgery method developed by Antonio Egas Moniz in the 20th century. This continues Phyrexia's theme of taking inspirations from real, flawed, and dark science. Civilizations. The Vek and the Dal were human civilizations with a strong Middle Eastern influence. This link is perhaps most obvious in their dress. They also had a naming convention where last names consisted of a short descriptor followed by a hyphen and then a clan name. This is common in many Arabic cultures. Some of the Vek and Dal were nomadic, as are some Middle Eastern peoples. The Vek also had oracles, which are most associated with classical Greece. Finally, the bola is an indigenous South American weapon. And if you look up what that name means in Spanish, you'll see why Nicobolas always has his full name when appearing on a card in that language. The Thalicos lack a consistent aesthetic, but their name is very Greek sounding to me. The Sky Shroud elves are pretty generic Tolkienian forest elves. They also apparently have the European fairy tale of the Three Little Pigs. Maybe they were actually stolen from Eldraine. Palisades were common across many historical cultures, with the name being of Latin origin. Their occasional blue face paint probably comes from the film Braveheart. Creatures. The Furnace of Rath was said to be populated by giant salamanders. Salamanders have been associated with forges as far back as ancient Rome, and were frequently portrayed as monstrous in medieval folklore. Rabid rats showcases a common trope of rats carrying rabies. In actuality, according to the CDC, rats are almost never found to be infected with rabies, and are not known to transmit rabies to humans. I mostly brought it up to show that magic is too harsh on rats. Look at their little noses. Apes of Rath's controversial pun name comes from the 1939 novel The Grapes of Wrath. The Mog likely take inspiration from the Orcai of the Lord of the Rings, being hulking, brutish, goblin-esque creatures specifically bred by a dark master for warfare. Lowland Basilisk is a basilisk, a legendary reptilian creature popularized by Pliny the Elder. Traditionally, basilisks kill with a venomous gaze, but the flavor text of Lowland Basilisk specifies that those of Rath are unique. The Lycids are very reminiscent of the facehuggers from the previously mentioned Alien franchise, both in design and biology. Both are parasitic, multi-limbed creatures that latch onto the head for nefarious reasons. The jackalope is a humorous creature from American folklore. The angel in Angelic Blessing has wings on her ankles, which probably comes from some depictions of the Greek god Hermes. Miscellaneous cards. When the name and flavor text of the card reap are combined, they strongly evoke the biblical parable of reaping what you sow. The card Overlaid Terrain also has an even more direct allusion to this line. The term scapegoat also originated in the Bible, though it was used very differently there than it is now. Equilibrium discusses the weighing of souls. This motif goes back all the way to the weighing of the heart from ancient Egyptian belief, but the equilibrium imagery likely takes its inspiration from Christian art. Anarchist shows that Rath apparently has the concept of anarchy, a term first used in 1539 and rising to prominence in the 19th century. Cursed Flesh's flavor text references the 1929 novel A Farewell to Arms. Time Warp, with its flavor text, is clearly a reference to the iconic song of the same name from Rocky Horror Picture Show. Please do not copyright strike this video. Rats of Rath features a statue heavily based on the Moai of Easter Island. Finally, High Ground is a reference to Don't Try It. Fun fact, I own 18 copies of this card. That is not a joke. Overall, I would say that Rath lacks consistency in both aesthetic and tone. Compared to the other three planes that I've looked at in this series, it's difficult to pinpoint exactly what effect the creators were going for with Rath. It's very disparate in terms of the pre-existing cultures they pulled from, and the real and mythical creatures that they included, and not in a way that makes Rath seem realistically complex or fleshed out. It seems more like half the cards for the plane were created individually and then haphazardly added in. Rath shines through the most when it's depicted as a dark, hopeless hellworld. However, this goal is all too often undercut by bad jokes and distracting references in flavor texts or random cards that don't fit that tone at all. Mirrodin. The plane. Mirrodin was originally known as Argentum which is Latin for silver, fitting for a shiny metal plane created by the Silver Golem. I would say that the cyberpunk genre leads a great influence to Mirrodin, visible in elements such as visors and cybernetic enhancement. Mirrodin is also composed of layered spheres. However, I don't think it's Dante's hell that leads influence here, but the concept of a stellar engine. This hypothetical megastructure will be built around a star, which it collects energy from. Mirrodin could be considered a stellar engine, in that it's a mechanical construction built around a collection of powerful suns. The modern-day understanding of stellar engines is only a few years older than Mirrodin's first appearance, but the base idea goes back to science fiction from 1937. The Panopticon was the surveillance center of Mimnarch. Later on, Charon was held there under the control of the Phyrexians. These two plot points perfectly represent the main components behind the Panopticon thought experiment. The Panopticon, devised by 18th century philosopher Jeremy Bentham, is a hypothetical prison built in such a way that a single guard could look at any cell at any time. The prisoners never know when they're being surveilled, so they always act as if they are. The literal prison element of the Panopticon is represented by Charon's time as a prisoner there. The Panopticon, as a symbol of surveillance, is represented by it being the center of Mimnarch's monitoring of the plane. The Glimmer Void expanse consists of hexagonal plates. The hexagon has many properties that make it important to engineering and geometry. I don't understand any of them, but that's fitting for a mechanical world. Hexagons are also highly associated with bees, who also have a reputation for engineering. The Oxida chain likely gets its name from the process of oxidation, which leads to rust. Fittingly, the area is full of red, rusted metal. Peoples. The Veldican have a vaguely Roman feel to them. The Synod, a group of Veldican leaders, takes its name from a Christian assembly that in turn takes its name from Latin. The researcher Pontifex is named after the award for a priestly council member in ancient Rome. Another Veldican, Janus, was named after a Roman god. Finally, the two peoples both had centurions. The Morlock probably get their name from the Morlocks of the Time Machine. Both are generally unpleasant, aggressive, skulking types. The leader of the Leonin is known as the Ka. This likely comes from the term Khan, used across Asia. One of the Leonin was named Kimba, which sounds a lot like the animated lion Kimba. Blinding Beam depicts a concept similar to the mythical heat ray of Archimedes. Finally, the Leonin also have Bola, still of South American origin. Creatures. The blink moths, tiny flying light creatures, likely originate from the will-o'-the-wisp and similar spirits from across European folklore. The Mir are confirmed to take their name from Myrmiko, which is Greek for ant, because of their small bodies and worker mentality. Additionally, the Greek Myrmidons, inhabitants of Thessaly, are now defined as a subordinate who executes orders unquestioningly or unscrupulously. Very fitting for Mimnarch's mindless minions. The strange artifact creature depicted on Stalking Stones is clearly based on Stonehenge. I guess the pieces of Stonehenge just walking over from their point of origin is one solution to the mystery. Doxter Colossus takes its name from the Colossus of Rhodes, a massive statue from ancient Greece. Miscellaneous cards. Reap and Sow provides this video's third reference to that Bible verse for some reason. Fist of Suns is highly visually reminiscent of the Infinity Gauntlet from Marvel Comics. Its flavor text speaks of limitless power, which the Infinity Gauntlet also offers. It makes sense that we end with New Phyrexia, the civilization who believes itself to be the pinnacle of perfection and the endpoint of evolution. In general, I will be focused on the elements of New Phyrexia that separate it from its predecessor, in order to avoid repeating myself. New Phyrexia has a more Roman bent. Their leaders are the praetors, which is a term for a Roman magistrate. Gen Gitaxis is an augur, which is another Roman title. Conifex meant executioner in ancient Rome. This Roman influence overlaps with a mostly Catholic Christian one. The Machine Orthodoxy title of apostle is most associated with the followers of Jesus in the Bible. Relatedly, Their title of Cenobite is a real term for a member of a community-focused religious order. However, it is most associated with the Hellraiser franchise. The Cenobites of that series share certain similarities with the Phyrexians, such as intense self-modification. Their holy book is also quoted in a book-then-verse format like the Bible. The Progress Engine ranks include pontiffs and exarchs, both of which are used in Christianity. Finally, Christian connotated words, such as Orthodox, Cathedral, Scripture, and Hymn appear too. The Geiger/Xenomorph inspiration is also back in full force. Head writer Doug Bayer specifically compared the Phyrexian influence over Karn to the machinations of the character Wormtongue in The Lord of the Rings. Factions. The White faction is aesthetically based on porcelain due to its cold, polished bone smoothness and creepy doll associations, combined with how it looks when cracked and rusted. In Norse mythology, the Norns were female beings of great power. For blue, chrome was chosen due to its medical connotations. Their spire monitor is very reminiscent of the Fell Beast design used in Lord of the Rings films. Black is inspired by a mechanic's garage full of grime and oil. Their title of Thane comes from English history. The Thanes of both cultures operate in a complex feudal system. The fact that there are 7 of them could also be inspired by the Princes of Hell, of which there are traditionally also 7. Sheoldred perhaps takes her name from Sheol, the Hebrew underworld. Red has an industrial feel to it. I would argue that the green faction is the least clearly evocative of a concept, just generally being gross animals. Vornklex's ability to absorb flesh from Kaldheim might be inspired by the Thing from The Thing. With that, this video has come to completion. What's your favorite era of Phyrexia? Who would you vote for Father of the Machines? Did I miss anything? Please comment below, and consider liking and subscribing to support this channel. Thank you.